Hey guys, it's Counting in my review for The Outsider, Episode 3, Dark Uncle, and once again, I was very excited for this episode, especially coming off the heels of last week and everything that went down. I mean, such an amazing premiere right out of the gates, giving you a good example of what the show is going to be, but then going into completely uncharted territory, so it made me that much more excited to see what exactly was going to happen in this episode, because I wasn't really sure what they were going to do, but I'll just say right now, if this episode's any indication, I am definitely hooked on where we're going, because there's a lot of interesting avenues that they introduced in this episode. There's a lot more that we get into here, especially from the secondary characters, which I really did appreciate, but there really is a lot to dive into here. Now, right off the bat, I will say this was definitely more of a table setting episode. It's a lot of just starting to put pieces into play, giving us an idea of what the show is going to be moving forward. But I think after last week, with all of the craziness that went on and all of just the extreme just trauma that all these characters are going through, it made sense to kind of take a step back and focus more on some of the more character elements of the show, which I really did appreciate. But we're just getting to right now. So I think the first thing that I really want to talk about is something that I was very excited for this episode, is that I knew we were going to get the inclusion of a new character, that of course being Holly Gibney, played by the amazing Cynthia Erivo, who can I just say has been killing it in everything lately, and so far on the show, it's no exception. I mean, she did a lot with this role. Holly Gibney already is a very interesting character. I love this character that she's playing, where she's such an unorthodox type of detective, to the point where people don't even think she's a detective. And it's not just because of the way she goes about things. I mean, right off the bat, not wanting to do anything with this case until she actually met Anderson face to face. I thought that was very interesting. But then playing into her whole ability with what she can do with like numbers and dates and things like that, it's really interesting stuff. She has this very photographic memory, but not to the point where she can just remember things in her head. Like some people have photographic memories. Hers is practically an encyclopedia. I mean, there's so much knowledge that she's absorbed over the years, and getting into how this is both a, strength and a weakness for her. It's a weakness because it got so bad that her parents had her tested by, like, all of these doctors when she was very young, and that she's been studied and written about. I mean, this is a really interesting character. I love what she's bringing to the table here, and I like that she's upset that she had to, like, explain all of this to them. She is put off by the way that the detectives are treating her. They're treating her like she's special, and she doesn't want that. She wants to be treated, as she's just one of them. And I like the way she gestures to, Anderson when she tells him that, like, she was happy that he didn't drink anything, because he was trying to make her comfortable, and he succeeded at, and he wasn't trying to bombard her with questions like everyone else was. He treated her like an equal, and that's something that she really did appreciate overall. But Erivo, I thought, just brought so much to this character. You can tell that she's someone that is quite troubled. There's a lot that she's been through, but she's also very determined. She really does want to solve this case, and I really do like what we end up getting with her here. I like the bond that her and Anderson are already forming. I think that part is very interesting. But then even at the end, where, she is trying to get more into, the Maitlands and things like that, but obviously she can't because she's not a family friend. You just wonder where exactly she is going to take this case, and I think her theory about the idea of everyone having a double is something that we're going to come back to in a little bit, but I think that's something that does actually hold quite a bit of legs, and I think it's a theory that does actually make a lot of sense, and I'm excited to see where that really does go. But I really love what they do with her in this episode. I thought that she just brought so much to the show. There was already a lot of great characterization there, but Holly's such an interesting character in that way. again, just because of how different she is, this memory that she has is something I'm very interested in getting more into. I feel like there's a lot more to uncover in terms of her past, and I hope the show is able to dive into it, but also because of the type of range that Erivio has. When you have an actress that you know can give such layered performances, this show is definitely utilizing her very well, and I'm very excited to see what she does moving forward, because I just thought she was just such a brilliant addition, and definitely maybe my favorite thing about this entire episode. I love what they did with her here. But the other thing to talk about before we dive more into some more character stuff, there were two big twists that went down in this episode. The first one involves the character of Jack Hoskins, who I'm really glad they did more with him, because the one thing I will say about the premiere last week is that besides Anderson, the Maitlands, Anderson's wife, characters like that, we didn't know a ton about these characters. They were very much just the other detectives. So the show, and that's not a problem. Like, it's just for a first episode, they didn't leave much of an impression on me, but the character of Jack Hoskins really is leaving an impression on me, because right off the bat, he goes into this, this room where those clothes are, and he's very overconfident. He doesn't think anything that bad is going to happen to him, but very early on in the episode, he is confronted by this apparition, and pretty much after that, he's never the same. He keeps going to bars and doing his same thing, and I like that they present that this is not a good guy. Like, he's sexually harassing women, and he's saying all these comments to them, and he's constantly getting drunk. So this is not necessarily a good person. But because he's now been affected by this apparition, he's doing all these weird things. He keeps repeating certain words, and he's like passing out, and he has all these like wilts on the back of his neck. So there's a lot of weird shit going on there, and I'm excited to see what that is all about, because I feel like this is one of those characters that's just going to deteriorate more and more throughout the entire series. And that's something that King really does play into, is that those who are sinners, are punished the worst. And that's exactly what's going on with Hoskins. I think that the show did a really good job in just showing just how, again, just how unlikable of a character this really was. So to put him in this situation, it doesn't necessarily make us sympathize with him, but it makes us interested in seeing what they're going to do, where else they can take him. How far is this really going to go? What's really going on here? There's a lot of possibilities, and I'm excited to see what that really is all about overall, but I guess we'll have to see what ends up happening there. And, him repeating, like, just make it stop, but then the end of the episode ends on the perfectly chilling note of him just saying whatever you need me to do over and over again. And who that demon is, I think, is very much connected to maybe the same demon that young Jessa Maitland is seeing, which we'll get into that stuff in a little bit as well. But I thought the show did a really good job with that. But the other twist that I thought was just absolutely brilliant and pretty much blew me away is what they end up doing with the character in this jail cell. Because throughout this episode, we keep cutting back to this random character. We don't know who he is. We've never seen him before. All we know is that he is being harassed by people in the prison, and he keeps trying to cut like deep into his leg to get out of there. We think he's trying to like make a break first, and we don't really know what that's all about. But basically, it keeps going on. It just keeps getting worse and worse. There's like a second inmate that enters, and there's a guard that's like unlocking a cell door. But then, of course, we get that scene with Holly where she goes over to the hospital because she wants to see Fred Peterson, because we find out that Fred Peterson is still very much alive. He's comatose, but he is very much alive, which I'm glad, because we still have a Peterson on the show, so we can still dig into that family a little bit. I think it would have been a mistake if they would have just offed him completely. So I'm glad to see that he is still out there. But what we find out is far more crucial than what we would have thought. It has nothing to really do with the Petersons, but we do find out that there was this nurse in the hospital that apparently has been accused of causing this disappearance from these two missing sisters. And basically, this hospital worker is in in custody for this, and that these two girls that were missing were eventually found dead, and he's obviously been accused. It turns out that this character we've been cutting back to in the jail cell is actually that nurse, and that he is very much connected to what's going on. And I just thought this was such a brilliant reveal. I love the way they played this, where we see that he ends up slitting his throat and things like that. But I don't think this was his own doing. Like, I very much do think that he is being haunted by that same aberration that, that Jack is being haunted by. I think it's the same aberration, like I said, that Jessa is being haunted by. And I'm excited to get more into that. But I just thought, focusing on, this character that seemed almost random. Like, why do we keep following this guy around? Such an arbitrary thing to do, and giving it far more of a purpose, showing that this isn't just a random thing. There are other people that have been disappearing. There have been other, cases that have gone down. This is a guy who basically was in Terry's position. I think it's pretty clear this guy, I'm assuming, did not do it. I'm assuming that he was just accused because maybe he was the last person to see the girls. We're not entirely sure. We just know that he was the one accused of murdering them, and I really like what they did here. The parallel between him and Terry was very well done, and I just thought it was a very effective moment. There were some really creepy moments throughout this entire episode, and that's something I can very well say this show is doing an excellent job with. It is freaking me out. It is very eerie, but it's not in the sense where it has to do jump scares every few seconds. It's what the characters are saying or what we're seeing. The show knows exactly when to cut away and when to show what's happened to that character, and I think they're doing such an excellent job with that. And those two instances, I think, are perfect examples of how well the show is handling the horror aspect, and I really love the way they leaned into that here, and it just made for that much more of a riveting hour for sure. Alright, so with all that stuff, I think I covered basically everything that went down in the episode. Of course, minus the main stuff going on with Anderson, which I thought, once again, was brilliantly handled. I love that in the beginning of the episode, that he has basically been told that, like, he has to take an active leave. He cannot participate in this investigation anymore. He's gotten way too deep into it, but he doesn't care. He, you can tell, is still very much haunted by that shooting. He knows that he fucked up. He wants to do right. And I think when, the conversations he has with his wife and things like that, you can really see how this is starting to affect him. You can really see how he wants to get to the bottom of things, but again, he's trying to do it in the best way possible. He's trying to do it in a way that isn't going to ruffle any feathers, and I like where that is headed overall. And again, I like that I think a big example of that is how he was the only one that treated Holly with respect. He didn't demean her. He didn't bombard her with questions. He just treated her like a normal individual, which is something that she's just not used to. She's not used to people not being put off by her, but that's exactly what Anderson did. And I think the show is doing a good job of showing that, yeah, Anderson has made a lot of mistakes, but he's aware that he did it, and he's trying to make up for it. And I really do love where they're going with him, but the stuff with Jessa is so interesting, because obviously in the first episode, we saw this scene where she's talking to Glory about how she's, there was some man that was calling out to her. Glory said it was a bad dream. We knew, obviously, that was not the case. We knew very well there was some sort of spirit that's haunting her, and we get a lot more into it here, and it's a lot creepier than we thought it was. It turns out she has had since that first episode, she's had like 4 encounters with this demon. The first time it looked like Terry, and each time after that it's gotten more and more monstrous and buff looking, and it's gotten to the point where she's not even afraid of it. She's just angry at it. She doesn't like the fact that it's haunting her. And I like that she's not scared. I think that's really interesting that she's not scared of this. She's more just angry about it. She doesn't like what's going on there. And, basically, she tells, the thing I think is most creepy about this is when she literally tells Anderson that, like, he's the one that should be scared. So clearly there's something going on here. I don't think that the point of this is, for Jessa to be taken away. I think the demon is using Jessa as maybe a host of sorts, and that Jessa is going to be the one that, this is like, Jessa was basically the way for this demon to get closer to those that it means to haunt. I mean, again, there's a lot that we don't know that's going on there, but I really love the way that whole scene is done, the way that we slowly unravel what's going on, but also knowing that this demon wants to go after Anderson. And it makes sense, not just because Anderson's the main character of the show, but because Anderson's the one that's, made so many mistakes already. And this is already having such a huge effect on him. We can already see, I mean, he's not, in the middle of the night, he's going out and, he's not trying to sleep or anything. He's talking to the detectives. Like, that's how much he cares about this case. That's how much it's weighing on him. And I think that's what the demon wants. I think that's its initial plan. And I think we're definitely seeing that here. But the other moment that I absolutely loved in this episode is the talk we get between Anderson's wife and Glory. I thought this was such a fantastic scene. I love the way it was done, where you can see that Glory is very much hurting. Not just because of the fact that Terry's gone, but also because what's going on with both Jessa and Maya, that they are basically being antagonized by the school. They're looked at now as they're looked at now as sort of like dangers, and that there's this growing sort of eeriness to them, that they don't want to be around them, and that they're having problems in school. And you can see how this is really weighing on Glory. So I think her confiding in Anderson's wife is really what she needed, because I've said it before, I don't know if Glory and Anderson are ever going to be on the same page, but I do think that there is a way for him to help heal Glory, because she's obviously going through a lot of pain. And oh my god, Julianne Nicholson is doing such an incredible job in this show, but especially the scene where she talks to her about how Terry helped calm his daughters with this Leprechaun movie, how his daughter, Jessa was terrified of the leprechaun, and that she was basically in a position, she was just so terrified that it was going to come after her. And Terry told her that, like, yes, leprechauns are out there, but they're only around in Ireland and they can't, get anywhere close to us. It just shows how good of a father he really was. And you see just how innocent these characters were. And I think they're doing an excellent job of it. They're not doing it to the point where, like, they're so innocent to the point where it doesn't feel real. Like, no, this was a good person. He didn't do anything bad. And the fact that now that name has been tainted forever, until obviously they find the real suspect, but it's been tainted to the point where people don't want to associate with the name Maitland anymore. I mean, you can just really see the toll it's taken on Glory, and I think she really needed someone like Anderson's wife at that moment, and I really love the way that whole thing was done. There was just a lot of great development for Anderson this week. I love the reveal as well that he gets, that there's something going on with Terry at a nightclub, that Detective Savalo prevents to him with, like, all this the findings at the barn and things like that, and that there were surveillance footage of him at a club, but it was from like someone who was like 80 or 90 years old. So there's a lot that is going on there, and I think the show is doing a really good job of laying those building blocks for what could eventually, be far more prominent overall. And I liked what we got here. They did a really good job of exploring the horror side of things, but also the more character building side of things. And I think both elements were just really well presented here, and I really love the way this whole thing was done. But getting into the directing here, no, we do not have Jason Bateman, unfortunately, anymore, but we still do have what Bateman did so well. Andrew Bernstein's directing is still very close to what Bateman was able to capture. However, his leans far more into the horror side of things. I mean, his directing, it's very creepy. It's very eerie in that way. It really puts you into this horrific side of things, and I thought he did a very good job with that, but also the building momentum that is, and the weight that this is having on all the characters, he also did a really good job in directing here. But the writing by Richard Price continues to also just be fantastic, and I'm going to repeat myself again, but I just think that the way he's able to blend both the foreboding horror, which he's doing an excellent job with. The show creeped me out many times throughout this episode. But also the slower, dramatic, more, authentic character side of things. He is just doing such a great job with blending them, and it's a sign of a great writer when he's not relying on either one. This is not a character drama or a horror show. It's simply both. And those are what the best King adaptations, I think, are. I think it's the ones that focus on the characters but do still have the scares, and that's something the show is really recognizing. Because we have 10 episodes, we're able to really build all that stuff quite well. And I think things like Jessa's demon, and this demon that caused the nurse to kill himself, which again, I do believe that was something that he was tempted into doing, or whatever's going on with Jack right now. I think all of those are the same demon. I really do. I think they're all associated in that way, and I think the show's doing a really good job with that, but also the building of Anderson's, whole sort of paranoia and his PTSD and his regrets and things like that. I think that was played into very well. But the character of Holly Gibney just adds this whole other layer to the show that I'm really excited to dive more into. So a lot of great stuff going on there. Cinematography-wise, I mean, so many amazing shots in this episode. Just the opening shot alone of like them in the barn and seeing what they discovered. I mean, so much great stuff going on there. But the scene I think that stands out the most in terms of cinematography is that first scene with Hoskins, where he's all alone in the barn, and he doesn't think he's gonna find anything, and then he's attacked by the apparition, and just the way they frame that whole thing, I thought was masterfully done, and I really love the cinematography here. The score, again, continues to be great, and the editing in this episode was definitely really good for sure. So overall, guys, this was another really great installment of this show. I think I've gone about it long enough between the stuff with Holly Gibney, all the reveals that we're getting, the slow reveals, nothing too major, but enough to where it's hooking you into the mystery, but also focusing on those characters like Anderson, like Holly, like Glory. They're doing a lot here to, I think, really make this a very riveting show that I am really, really loving a lot so far. And I'm definitely going to give this episode of The Outsider, episode 3, Dark Uncle, overall in A-. But over, guys, to my review of this episode of The Outsider. Let me know what you guys saw this episode overall. Left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.